Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning and into the afternoon. My name is Vivian King, and I am the Communications Advisor for the Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families, known as Life for short. And I feel privileged to be your moderator for today. Sorry for the lag in hearing me. I was talking and I was still on mute, so you could not hear me. We have 120 people who are already here, so thank you for coming. You are here at Addressing Systemic Racism, the Toll of Infant Mortality and Prematurity on African American Families. Why are we doing this topic now? Prematurity Awareness Month is why we're doing this topic now. And this gives us the opportunity to talk about how chronic stress due to racism and discrimination impacts mothers and their birth outcomes, work that our life team is tackling each and every day. We have a dynamic panel that includes a physician, a psychologist, community advocates, voices that are the foremost authorities in Wisconsin and around the nation, I would say, on infant mortality and prematurity, and they have lived experiences as well. We will have a robust discussion about this topic later on. I, of course, have questions, but we want this to be interactive. So please feel free to type your questions as they come to you in the chat throughout our discussion, and we will try to get as many questions answered as possible. Some of you sent questions in ahead of time, and we will also be including some of those. We are streaming this live on Facebook. We are live now. And we are going to be recording this as well. And it will be housed on our Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families website after it is processed. So we will drop that in the chat later on as well. Something most important to us is feedback for our programming. So we will be dropping a survey link in the chat towards the end of the program as well. But to kick us off, I want to introduce our visionary for this series. Some of you already know her. Others may be meeting her for the first time, but she is a courageous and bold leader who fights for us and the community each and every day. Her name is Gina Green Harris. She is the director of the Center for Community Engagement and Health Partnerships, and she is always fighting for the community and for us. So please, at this time, welcome Gina Green Harris.
Thank you, Vivian, and thank you for this opportunity to have another webinar, which is entitled our Addressing Systemic Racism, the Toll of Infant Mortality and Prematurity on African American Families. And I'm going to turn my camera on here. I can see everyone now. I was wondering, can you see my face now? I want to just welcome you to our 6th webinar series. And quite frankly, we are all struggling with this global pandemic, and we've all had to pivot. We've all had to reshape, reframe, and pretty much rethink life as we know it. And unfortunately, that impact of COVID did not stop the devastation of infant mortality. It did not stop the devastation of prematurity, nor did it stop the impact of health disparities on communities of color. And so we recognize that in between COVID and our social justice unrest that we've experienced as a people, as a race, it was critical that we actually do something significant and intentional around addressing systemic racism. The team at the Life Course Initiative has been very proactive in addressing systemic racism. You see our team in front of you in this picture. We have Pat Bateman, Pernice Love, who you'll hear from on the panel today, Atifa Robinson, Michelle Corbett, and you've already heard from Vivian, and our very own Dave Frazier. Our team takes very seriously this issue. It is in our community. We want to address it in entirety, and we want to experience a decrease of poor birth outcomes for Black women, Black families, quite frankly. The panelists that you're going to hear from today, our very own Dr. Jasmine Zapata, who is joining the Life team here soon. We're incredibly excited about her presentation to kick us off. Dr. Dominique Pritchard, who is also working with us and work through Beloved Wellness. And we're excited to hear what she's talking about from a clinician standpoint, from our mental health perspective. Is going to be critical to this conversation. And of course, Dalby Blackwell, who many of you know as well as an anchor in this work in our community, co-founder of the African American Breastfeeding Network, has been a long-time pillar in this work. You guys are going to be in for a treat. And as I said, Pernice, who works with our Life team, but has a personal story and a connection in the Racine community to do this work in such an outstanding way. I just want to be clear about why do we even start having these webinars. As Viv said, you know, we're really committed, and we knew the unrest and the civil unrest and injustice to our community was, quite frankly, not something new to us, but it just rubbed us in a way that said, no, we can no longer not be is more proactive than we had been. And we wanted to make sure that we launched this in a meaningful way. Many of you know Juneteenth Day, and Juneteenth was really about more than announcing that slavery had ended, but it was about educating our people and educating those around us about we as Black people have added value. We actually are important to society, and we have things to offer society, and we have been offering scientific information, health information, and the like, and we have been making a difference in this country, and we had not been recognized. It is time that our work and contributions to this country become recognized. And so hence the Juneteenth was a kickoff, but the webinars are ongoing. And I just want to quickly shift here and end and say, as we're thinking about the webinar today, as you hear these dynamic speakers today, I don't want you to just hear, I want you to listen with the intent of doing something. I want us to move from promises to action. It is incredibly important that we take this information that we're getting today and use it to better our communities, to improve our families. We are asset-based. What does that mean? We have a plethora, a wellspring of resources in our community from us, through us, that we can bring to us. And it is incredibly important that you take this information that you get today and utilize it to better and impact our community. And so I am going to go back to Vivian at this point, and I just want to say one more closing, and yes to the church folks, one more closing, and that is we bring this conversation to address systemic racism in this setting, to address our most vulnerable population, and that is our Black babies. Our Black babies are our future. We have to do this, community, and we have to keep moving forward. And with that, I'll turn you back on to Ms. King. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gina. And I will say that Gina, I should have given her a much more robust introduction, because she is the award-winning director of the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health Center for Community Engagement and Health Partnerships. And through the office, she oversees the work of Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families, which is the organization and the partner that is leading this particular webinar with other partners, as well as you saw earlier on the screen. And Miss Green Harris's role expanded after her groundbreaking work with the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Institute. And so she also oversees the All of Us Milwaukee Research Program. And she received her Master of Business Administration from Franklin University in Columbus, Ohio, and her Bachelor of Science of Central State University. in Wilberforce, Ohio. So I just wanted to give her a little more so you can know a little more about her because she is dynamic, as you already heard. Now, moving on to our panelists. I feel very honored to share with you the four dynamic individuals that you will hear from today. Dr. Jasmine Zapata is an award-winning author, speaker, health empowerment champion, and physician known both locally and internationally. She is a board certified practicing pediatrician as well as a board certified preventive medicine public health physician. Her focus is on ways to get outside of the clinic walls to impact health outcomes for children and families on a community-based level. Her research and community work focuses on racial inequities in infant mortality, upstream social determinants of health, youth, resilience, and innovative methods of community engagement and health promotion. She received her Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Sciences from Marquette University and her doctorate in medicine from the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. She has also completed her pediatrics residency, preventive medicine public health residency, and master's in public health at the UW School of Medicine and Public Health, where she currently works as an assistant professor, UW Health pediatrician practicing at Meriter Hospital, researcher, and Centennial Scholar. And you'll learn a little bit more about her as well. Our next panelist will be Dr. Dominique Pritchett. She is a licensed mental health clinician, consultant, and coach for clinicians. She is the owner and clinical director at Beloved Wellness Center, a private mental health practice in Kenosha, Wisconsin, offering holistic psychotherapy and wellness services. Dr. Pritchett strategically positions herself to address women's and girls' mental health challenges. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology with honors from Capella University, master's in clinical social work from Loyola University of Chicago, and a bachelor's in social work from Carthage College. Dalvery Blackwell is executive director of co-founder of the African American Breastfeeding Network. She is an international board certified lactation consultant and holds a bachelor in journalism and communications. AABN was established a decade ago to improve maternal child health and champion breastfeeding equity. The organization is committed to advancing system and policy changes, partnering with allies, and implementing community-based, family-centered, culturally tailored health education and support services. Through Dalvery's leadership and vision, AABN has built eminent goodwill in the community. The organization has been recognized and highlighted in local, state, and national media and reports, most notably the April 5th, 2015 Essence Magazine, 10 Things People Are Talking About, January 2015 in the Associated Press, 2014 in the CDC Breastfeeding Report Card, and the 2014 Black Child Development Institute Milwaukee Report, Being Black is Not a Risk Factor, Statistics and Strengths-Based Solutions. She has been instrumental in creating and building AABN's core program, Community Breastfeeding Gatherings, which is seen as a national model. So she's just dynamic. Received the 2017 Woman of Commitment Award from Wisconsin Alliance for Women's Health, and she was Milwaukee Community Journal 2018 Year of the Child, a Game Changer honoree. And last but certainly not least, my colleague, Prenice Love, who is a community strategist for life in Racine. Prenice has extensive experience in case management, program development, community leadership, and training and development. She has worked in Racine promoting healthy birth outcomes, helping families with prenatal and postnatal issues, in addition to compliance. Ms. Love received her Master of Business Administration from Cardinal Stritch University, a Bachelor of Arts and Community Leadership from Alverno College, and is pursuing a nursing degree at Gateway Technical College. You will hear from all of them later on, but to begin our discussion, we will have a special presentation from Dr. Jasmine Zapata. Dr. Jazz.
Yes, hello. All right, can you see me okay?
We can see you great.
All
Thank you.
right, all right. Um, awesome. It is such an honor to be here today. I only have a short time to talk. I could talk for hours and hours about this topic. I only have a short time to talk, but I do want to spend some of that time just giving honor to the Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families, to the team. Thank you, Gina and team, for inviting me to speak today. I'm so excited to be a part of this conversation. Prematurity Awareness Month is very, very special to me for personal and professional reasons. And it's just my honor to share my story with you all today. I'll be talking about the toll of infant mortality and prematurity on African American families by taking you on a journey through the NICU, Chronicles from the NICU. Next slide. So just a little bit of background about myself, and thank you so much, Vivian, for that beautiful introduction as you were reading my bio. But just some pictures. I am a speaker. I'm an advocate. I am a newborn nursery hospitalist. So in my clinical role, I run to deliveries, newborn babies being when they are born, if they're having breathing difficulties, any problems, we get a page, run to the delivery, and use our resuscitation skills to help them. I round on new babies, talk to new families about common issues in the newborn period, and do procedures as well. And then the other half of my time, I spend advocating for health equity in the field of maternal child health in a variety of different ways. With my public health background, and I absolutely love it. I'm also a mother. This is my family, and you'll be hearing a lot more about them in the next few slides. But before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit. I don't have time to tell you my whole life story, which I wish we did. I'll go all the way back to when I was first born, but just a little bit of background before I jump into my NICU story. I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, born and raised there. And I went to Riverside University for high school. I said ever since I was 5 years old that I wanted to be a doctor. And I have proof if you all want to ask. I have my beautiful mother who is actually on this webinar right now, which is such an honor and so special. So she can, if you guys don't believe me, she's my proof. Ever since I was 5, I said I wanted to be a doctor. And it was such a dream come true when I got accepted into Marquette University to study biomedical sciences and go on my path to becoming a doctor. And this is a picture of Marquette. I was so excited when I put in my application, got accepted, so excited. But one thing that happened to me, especially as we're talking about racism, setting the stage for this, I got a full scholarship, full tuition scholarship, plus some, to go to Marquette. And it was called the Burke Scholars Program. So excited. It was service and leadership scholarship. And so I remember within the first week of school starting, there was a big award ceremony for the Burke Scholars. And it was in the cafeteria of one of the dorms. So I literally had some of my white friends, they were walking ahead of me and I was behind them. And they went in, and then there was like a security guard or people standing at the door to the cafeteria. And I literally watched them just walk right in. And then when I walked up so excited, they stopped me and they said, "Oh, sorry, we're so sorry. The cafeteria is closed. This is a private event for the Burke Scholarship Program." And I said, excuse me, I am a Burke Scholar. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then they let me in. So that was just a taste. Oh, I got stories for days. I can tell story after story after story of ways that I've experienced racism or discrimination over the course of my life, because again, we're taking a life course perspective. So that's just one thing that happened in my early days at the very beginning. And I would face a lot of other experiences like that. Other major things that happened in my life as I look back from when I was a little girl, I had a life-changing experience that happened during my junior year of college, where I got a call that my 16-year-old brother wouldn't wake up one morning. So I was on Marquette campus and I rushed over to the place that he was staying at. And when I got there, the paramedics were there and they walked out, and I walked in, and my mom was there and looked at me and said they couldn't revive him. And my brother was laying there dead. It was a very traumatic experience for me. It was my junior year, right before 3 months before I was going to take the medical college admissions test to become a doctor. My world was shattered. It was a very traumatic experience for me growing up. I also had other things going on growing up. We didn't live in the, I can't complain because we were not homeless, but we still, did not have a rich lifestyle or things like that. We were on, we had a lot of challenges that came about, and I faced other things along my journey from when I was just 5 years old and said I wanted to be a doctor. But all that to say, I had resilience. I had the support of my communities, and I was able to still, despite the things that had happened to me, graduate from Marquette and go to the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health to become a physician. And I was so excited. One other notable thing that happened in my Marquette days, in my early days, is that when I was on Marquette campus, I got exposed to the Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families way back in around 2007, 2008, when it was in its early stages and first beginning. People were just starting to talk about racial inequities and infant mortality. And that was my first exposure to that. I was married. I got married pretty young to my high school sweetheart when we were just 19, but I didn't have kids yet when I first started getting connected with Life Course Initiative for Healthy Families. But I was so intrigued by the statistics, and I said, we have to find a way that we can combat these statistics. Why are college educated Black women having premature babies at 2 to 3 times higher rates than white women who drop out of high school? Why is that the case? Why does social economic status not matter? Like, why is this happening? We need to save these babies. And so I got really involved in that work, and I carried that in my heart as I went into medical school, saying, I want to do something about this. I was so excited my senior year of college, right before I graduated, when I had my own firstborn baby, a son, full term. I had a natural delivery. He was born in March, and I went back to class a week and a half later because I had to graduate in May so that I could start medical school in the fall. So I had my firstborn son, and then I moved to Madison. That's how I got to Madison to go on my journey to becoming a doctor. But I never knew that one day soon during my medical journey that I was going to become one of those statistics that I heard about. Next slide. Now I'd like to share with you a little bit about how I became one of those statistics. So college educated Black women having higher rates of premature birth and adverse birth outcomes. Well, I had my son who was full-term healthy baby. And then when I was in medical school, finishing up my first year, I found out I was pregnant again, this time with a baby girl. I was due on January 2nd, but on September 20th, I started having a tight pain in my lower abdomen. And I remember I was walking to class and I just thought it was gas. But then I got into class, and it just seemed like it was getting worse. Now, this didn't feel like contractions because I had gone through contractions with my first baby because I had a natural delivery. This was something different. It was kind of like a sharp heaviness in my lower abdomen. And I called the doctors, and I talked to the nurse, and they said, oh, you're just having Braxton Hicks contractions. Everything's okay. Just lay down for a while, drink some water. So I did. But then it kept coming back, and it was getting a little bit worse. And I called back and I said, hey, I think something's going on. And I felt like they just didn't listen to me as much and kind of just brushed it off. And so I said, okay, maybe it's just some cramps, or, I have to try to use the bathroom again. But this time when I went to the bathroom, I saw bright red blood, and I knew something was wrong. So long story short, I rushed to the emergency room, and when they checked me, they said, oh my God, you are 10 centimeters dilated and your bag of water is bulging. So I had to go via ambulance to the delivery hospital in town. And when I got there, they told me words I'll never forget. They said, you're going to meet your baby girl today. And my heart fluttered. I was so excited because I finally was going to meet my baby girl, but then reality hit. And I had just a heaviness again in the pit of my stomach because I knew this was too early. This was too soon. I'm not due until January 2nd. I'm barely even 6 months pregnant. It's too early. It's too soon. But then I remember being rushed away to the operating room, the C-section suite. And within a few minutes, they said, your baby girl is here. I remember my husband being next to me and just looking in his eyes, and he was trying to be so strong for me. but I can tell, I could see the fear in his eyes. Normally when babies are born, you hear screaming and crying and joy, but it was completely silent when she was born because she wasn't breathing. Her lungs were too little and too fragile, too little and too fragile to breathe on her own. So they had to intubate her, put a breathing tube down. They had to do a lot of life-saving measures right there in that resuscitation room, but they kept her heart going. They kept her strong. And my husband got to take a quick peek at her, and then they rushed her away to the NICU. This is a picture of her in our first couple minutes of being able to see her. She was so tiny and so fragile, yet she was mine. Next slide. This was her as well. When they put her in an incubator, her skin was translucent. She was so tiny. She was too fragile to even be able to hold her. And I'll just pause right here. As I'm going through these slides, we're talking about the toll that prematurity and infant mortality and prematurity has on African-American families and babies. So I'm going to start out by telling you through storytelling, telling you the toll that it has on these little Black babies' bodies. The risk that they face fighting for their lives when they're born premature. Prematurity is the leading cause of Black infant mortality. Babies dying before their first birthday. The leading driver is this journey, this war that they have to face in the NICU when they're born so early so soon. So I'm going to be talking about some of the tolls that prematurity takes on these little precious babies. But also, as I'm talking, I'm going to be talking about the toll that it takes on the mother, the toll that it takes on the family through sharing my journey. And as you're listening to this, I hope that you can just take these things to heart as we move into our robust discussion, and also what things that you can do even as you leave here. Some of the pictures that I'm going to be showing might be a little graphic, and I thought about taking them out, but having these real raw conversations about the realities of what's going on every single day is something that is very, very important. So if any of these slides seem a little sensitive, feel free to just turn off the screen and just listen to my voice. But I do encourage you to stick with me through this so that you can really see the toll that prematurity takes on these little babies, what they face, as well as the family. All right. So next slide. So I'm going to start out talking a little bit about the toll that it takes on the babies. They face respiratory challenges. Their lungs are very, very small, and some of them can face respiratory failure and pass away because of that. This is a picture of her when she was first born, and she has a breathing tube down. Next slide. This is a picture of the first time that I got to hold her. My sweet baby girl, Amira. Usually one of the joys of motherhood is when that baby comes, you get to put the baby on your chest and hold them. And it's just absolutely amazing. However, she was so fragile and in such critical condition. I could not hold her for 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks. And this picture is so special to me because she was born September 20th. My birthday is October 14th. So actually it was a little more than 2 weeks. And on my birthday, she finally was stable enough from a medical standpoint for me to be able to hold her. Even with that life support still in that breathing tube, they were able to position me to be able to hold my baby girl for the first time. And this was one of the most amazing feelings ever. But as I held her, so she was fighting for her life from a respiratory standpoint. As I held her, it was very hard for me emotionally to embrace her at first because I didn't know, was she going to live or was she going to die? One of the tolls that it takes on mothers, and I'll get into the social emotional toll in a little bit more later on, is that it's hard to attach to something that you are already in the early grieving stages for. I didn't know, was she going to die? In fact, I had a cousin actually call me the night that I gave birth because there was just a lot of news spreading throughout the community and my family about what happened. And when they heard she was born so early, I had a cousin call and say, "I'm so sorry, Jasmine, for your loss. I heard you had a miscarriage." And I said, "No, she's still alive. She's still alive." But I didn't know how long she was going to be alive. So it's like you're trying to already start grieving and shielding your heart and preparing for the worst. But then at the same time, they are still alive. You're their mother. You're the one that's supposed to be there and comfort them. So it takes a real toll. And I don't even have time to really get into it, but I'm just trying to give you a little glimpse. But anyway, this was such a special moment when I got to hold my baby girl for the first time. But respiratory is one of the tolls that it takes. Next slide. So then the next thing is GI issues, gastrointestinal and nutritional issues. Some babies that are born prematurely can have issues with their gut, where they can get something called necrotizing enterocolitis and face other issues. But basically, that's a life-threatening condition where basically parts of their bowel can get damaged and infected and die off, basically. And they have to get a lot of medicines to try to control it, but also a lot of times have to get surgery to remove parts of the bowel when they're only tiny little micro preemies. One of the biggest things that protects against that is human milk, mother's milk. So I was so excited to be able to pump this milk for her. But if you can imagine the toll that it took on me as a Black mother, wanting to save my baby, feeling helpless because I couldn't do any medical interventions to save her. I wasn't her doctor. I was still in medical school, so I wasn't trained and didn't have all the knowledge, but plus it was out of my hands. It was in God's hands and it was in the doctor's hands at this point. One things I did have control over was being able to produce milk for her. But as you can imagine, that put me under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress to do that. But I was so excited that I was able to produce. And these are some of the first pictures of my very first colostrum, my very early breast milk. And it was just so exciting. And thankfully, Amira did not have any serious GI complications, but there are some babies that do. Next slide. Other things they can face is issues with their skin breaking down. And so they go in these incubators that keep them protected, keep them at a good temperature. It's hard for them to regulate their temperature sometimes. So this was just her in here. And if you can notice how my hand, my one finger, her whole entire hand covered my one finger. That's how tiny she was. Next slide. And this is just her again. As I was going through this roller coaster of emotions, I'll never forget when I was talking to one of my doctors, Dr. Amma Karanting, I'll never forget. And she's so special to us. Even today, it was in the early days when Amira was in the NICU, and they were telling me all these numbers and statistics and telling me the things that she was facing, how I need to stay by my phone because if in the middle of the night she's crashing or might not make it, they're going to tell me to come to the hospital. And I remember just being so overwhelmed that I just started audibly weeping in the middle of rounds and then I just ran out because I just couldn't take it. And something that I'll never forget, because it's just such a heavy burden going through this, Dr. Amma ran after me, the neonatologist doctor. She ran after me into the hallway and she said, come back, come back. And she sat me down in a private room and she just embraced me and she just talked to me and answered my questions. And she said, we're going to do everything we can to fight for your baby. And she said, I'm a praying woman. She said, I don't say this to everybody, but I'm a praying woman. I'm praying for your baby. I'm going to do everything that I can to support your baby through this. And we are here and dedicated to her. And that was something that in that moment, it shifted something where I felt that I could really trust the doctors, because it felt like I was more than just a statistic, or Amira was more than just another baby to round on, that they really cared. But it was very hard. It was especially hard for me because if you remember my story, just a year and a half earlier, just 2 years earlier, 2.5 years earlier, I had lost my little baby brother suddenly. So my family was still healing from that rawness of the loss of my brother. Now, at least when my brother passed away, he died suddenly. So it was kind of like a Band-Aid being ripped off, where it's like, okay, this happened. I'm shocked. I'm in pain, but I can start the healing process right away. With Amira being born, since her life was in limbo, I didn't know, was she going to live? Was she going to die? It was just so hard. And it was a lot of pressure on me because my family was just healing, especially my mom healing from the loss of her only son. Now I have this little baby. I said, I cannot put my family through this again. It was a very stressful time, but yet, just like she was a fighter, I said, I'm a fighter as well. Next slide. I can make it. And this is just showing how little she was. Next slide. Other things that these little babies can face, we're talking about the toll that prematurity takes on little babies, little preemies, especially Black babies. They can have issues with their heart and their blood. A lot of times they need multiple blood transfusions. So she needed multiple blood transfusions. She had some issues with the vasculature around her heart that is really common with preemies. It's something called a patent ductus arteriosus, which basically means babies, when you're pregnant with them, they bypass using their lungs. But when they come out and they're using their lungs, the path of blood flows differently. And anyway, she had an issue with that transition. And so she had to take a lot of medications for that. It was causing a lot of problems. And ultimately, eventually, she had to get a little procedure to actually close that vessel that was open and causing problems. So even at a small age, they can have issues with their heart and their blood. Next slide. They also can face issues with their brain and nervous system. When they're born so early like this, sometimes they just forget to breathe. It's called apnea of prematurity. So guess what the medication for that is? Caffeine. They actually give these tiny little babies caffeine. So imagine how scary it can be when you are in this room, you hearing all these beeps, and then all of a sudden you start hearing the alarms going beep, 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 because they're all of a sudden their oxygen levels just start dropping. And then their heart rate was in the hundreds. And then all of a sudden it starts dropping, and all kind of nurses and doctors rush in and just start shaking the baby. That is what an apnea of prematurity is, where your baby just decides to stop breathing because they're born too early, too soon. So one of the things they give them for that is caffeine. So that's one neurologic issue she faced, but she started having more of those than normal. And they got an ultrasound of her brain, an image of her brain, and it actually showed that she had a brain bleed, something called an interventricular hemorrhage. This is something that these micro preemies can face. Their vessels in their brain are so tiny and small that through the birth process, they can rupture. So imagine my heart when I actually was in medical. I was studying for an exam because I was trying to get my mind off things. I said, I really need to become a doctor now. Let me keep studying. And even though I was studying, because I said, I want to still be a doctor to help other babies like this. One of the real reasons I needed to keep studying was to just keep my mind busy. But anyway, I was studying with some friends a late night, and I'll never forget the call where they said, we need to talk to you. Your great baby has a grade 2 interventricular hemorrhage, a brain bleed. So thankfully that blood kind of disappeared on its own, but it caused some scarring in her brain, which basically caused her to be able to not reabsorb and get rid of the natural fluid in the brain. You make this fluid called cerebrospinal fluid in your brain, but then your brain has a way to drain it after it's done using it, and then it makes some more. Well, because of her brain bleed, she had scarring in her brain that caused her not to be able to drain that fluid. And so what happened is her head just started expanding. There was increased pressure on her brain. Imagine my heart, imagine having to tell my family that. Another toll that prematurity takes on these Black babies. So she ended up having to get a brain surgery to insert a little tube into her brain to drain the fluid. And then it came outside of her skin, down her neck, and then it drained it into her belly. That's called a VP shunt. So she had to get that. And she was only like 3-4 pounds when she got it. So that's one of the neurologic things these babies face. Next slide. Woo, so we've talked about some of the things that the babies face. Now let's talk about the moms. My spiritual health was in jeopardy. I grew up a woman of faith. That got me through so much. I'm not ashamed to say it. When everybody asks, how does Dr. Zapata do it? How are you reaching all these goals and doing all these things? Well, my faith in God, my church family, my spirituality has gotten me through ever since I was a little tiny girl. But my faith was honestly shattered after my brother passed away. But after my daughter was born premature, it shattered my faith. That was one of my cornerstones for getting through things in life. But when this happened, my faith was really shattered. And it took a while to to regain that faith. Thankfully, I had a strong support from my church family, my immediate family, to help me get through. But this was at St. Mary's Hospital. This was one of the images, and I would always see every day walking into the NICU. And that was always a reminder that God was with me. There's some bigger purpose going on with the situation. Even though I can't understand it now, it was for a bigger purpose. So a toll that it takes on Black moms is our spiritual health. Next slide. It also takes a toll on our physical and mental health. This picture here shows my scars. I'm not ashamed. I'm going to show it. It shows my scars. It's the actual staples. When I went into that premature birth, it damaged me psychologically because I literally felt like I had to get this baby ripped out of me. I laid there that night after the C-section feeling almost like I had gone through an abusive situation. A baby literally just got ripped out of me. I was not ready. And so after they did my C-section, they just stapled me up. So it took a lot on my mental health, feeling like my body just got violated, but also I felt inadequate. It took a toll on my emotional health because I said, my body wasn't good enough to carry this baby. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? And it also was painful to recover from this C-section. I cried tears. It was painful. It's a long recovery, recovering from these major operations. Next slide. It also takes a toll on your social emotional health, which I've kind of been talking about. There's studies that show moms of babies who are born premature are at higher risk for cardiovascular disease and other problems later in life. So it takes a big toll. But I wanted to show this picture because it shows some of my biggest support systems. My husband, my little baby at the time, MJ, he was 1.5 years old. My mother is in this picture, who got me through so much. And I just want to honor her. When I felt like giving up, she told me, we're not going to give up. We're going to pray. You sing to that baby every day. You pray for that baby every day. You touch her, let her know that you're here. We're going to get through this. My mom was such a big reason for that in my extended family. And also this other picture here shows my medical student colleagues. They came to the hospital to study with me because I didn't want to give up my dream of becoming a doctor. I was in medical school. So that was something that really helped me as far as social emotional strength. Next slide. So I'm going to wrap up with just a few slides of what happened after she got through that immediate period. This was my husband holding her. This is a whole other discussion. I hope we get into a little bit more about the toll that this takes on fathers. We talk a lot about what it does to the moms, but my husband, he honestly couldn't even hold her for a few months after me because it was just so emotionally hard for him as a dad who's supposed to be a protector, where you see this fragile life that does something to a man where you're helpless and you can't save that little baby girl. And this is just a precious picture of her reaching up to him. And it was very special. Next slide. So it takes a role on the father. So this is just a picture of her getting strong. This little baby girl, eventually she pulled out her breathing tube. She said, I'm done. She pulled it out and actually did well. So that's when we knew she was ready to be off. So she was slowly getting stronger. Next slide. This is just a picture of her when she reached 4 pounds. Hip, hip, hooray. I weigh 4 pounds today on November 17th. This picture, when we talk about purpose, let me tell you, November 17th of 2007 is when my brother passed away in Milwaukee. November 17th is also World Prematurity Day. And on November 17th is when my baby girl reached her hip, hip, hooray, I'm 4 pounds today. That's not by coincidence. I'm just going to tell you right now, my purpose in life, the stuff that happened to me, my purpose in life was for this to happen to me so I can raise awareness for this issue, so I could become a doctor, get those resuscitation skills in my hands and save other babies, so I can speak out about this, so I can do research, so I can save other Black babies' lives. What I went through with my brother also played a role in all of this. So all this isn't by accident. My life is on for a purpose. And this was just an example of that, but let me go because my time is up. We'll get into the next slide. So this is just a picture of her when she was taking one of her first baths. She's getting bigger and getting stronger. Next slide. And this is just a couple days before Christmas. As you can see, she's growing and getting bigger. My social emotional health is growing because I know she's going to survive. I have a glimpse of hope. Next slide. And this is her first Christmas. Talk about emotional tolls. I still haven't been able to take her home. She was born in September. It's Christmas. She's still not home, but we still tried to make it special. So these were my first little gifts that I gave to baby Amira for her first Christmas. But that's hard emotionally not to have your baby home for the holidays. Next slide. And this is just another picture of me holding her right before she came home. Next slide. And this is a special picture because notice her name on the bottom on the board at the hospital. Her name was on the bottom. But then next slide. This was the day we finally got to erase it because it was the day she was coming home. And that was really special to me. Next slide. So coming home was scary. So even though you're excited, it takes a huge toll on Black moms and families, because when you come home, that's not the end of the journey. She came home on that caffeine to remind her to breathe. She came home needing on oxygen and came home on an apnea monitor where basically it said, oh, if she stops breathing, this alarm will go off, and then run in the room and resuscitate her. Here's a quick video of how to do that. So imagine how scary that was for me and my husband bringing this medical fragile child home, but yet we were so happy and so excited. Next slide. And this is just a picture of her when she was actually finally home. And it was so beautiful. Next slide. So as you can see, my story ended with her coming home, but I want to take a moment to pause and a moment to remember that not every baby has this same happy ending. This picture represents here 5 babies that I know personally in my network of close family and friends who's had premature babies who did not make it home. And I just want to take a moment to honor them because these little babies matter too. And I know some of these pictures might be a little graphic, but we need to see these because these are more than just statistics and seminars and webinars to talk about a hot topic of infant mortality. These are real babies and real lives. And I just wanted to take a moment to honor their lives. They were important and they were special and they matter. Next slide. And so my goal, as I mentioned, is to mobilize other healthcare providers, mobilize community members to take awareness to this topic. And we need to have white coats for Black lives. We need to be talking about this issue. And in addition to just the healthcare field, we need the educational field on board, the criminal justice system on board, our social workers, our teachers, our community members, our family members. Everybody needs to be on board. Our housing, landlords, real estate agents need to be on board for how we can combat this issue because these little babies' lives mattered. And thankfully, I'm blessed to say that after she came home, I was able to still graduate from medical school on time. And then I went on to become a pediatrician and a public health doctor to now use my personal and professional skills to save babies through resuscitation, but also do things like this and bring awareness. So in my final slide, it just shows, in the next slide here, it just shows our family now. I have 3 kids now. I had another baby after Amira, and you can see that in the picture there. Amira is thriving. She's a 10-year-old firecracker. She's written books. She's gone on book tours, national book tours. She gave, earlier this year, Mae Jemison, the first Black astronaut, came to visit Madison. My daughter's book is about, it's called Amira's Space Adventure. And she wrote a book about going into space and some lessons learned there about friendship and things like bravery. Guess what? Amira signed her book and she took it to that Mae Jemison event and gave her book to the first Black female astronaut in our history. And she just thought that was normal, didn't bat an eye. This girl is thriving. And I want other Black babies to be able to not only survive, but to thrive as well. So that ends it. And I want to turn it back over to Vivian. I'm so thankful to be here. Thank you for this opportunity to let me pour my heart out. And I look forward to the discussion.
Dr. Jazz, that was so compelling. And from the comments in the chat, People have said amazing. I'm going to ask our other panelists to turn their cameras on and also turn their mics on as well. And as I do, though, I want to just share some of the things that people have said in the chat. First, that you were doing a great job, Dr. Zapata. Thank you so much for sharing your story. One said, I know that feeling way too well, and that was early in your presentation, and the feeling that you better not say anything or seem too overly emotional out of fear that people will think you're crazy. Somebody said, true strength. You get to watch over mothers leave the hospital with their babies. It's crushing. Mama of a 25 weeker who dealt with NEC here. Your daughter is beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Someone said your story was riveting. What an amazing testimony and eye-opening. I even wrote down just the roller coaster of emotions. I'm in chills, just everything that you said, and just how you felt when they said you were going to meet your daughter today, and then you looked in your husband's face, and the look wasn't congruent with a happy baby. So I know these are just some of my reactions, and what I want to do now is invite the panelists to give their reaction. And I want to start with Dalvery, because I know, Dalvery, you inspired Dr. Zapata early on. So if you can begin with your reaction to her story.
Oh, wow. I'm filled with so much emotion. I'm going to first start by saying what Dr. Zapata hinted to, which really is paramount in my opinion, is, we never know where our lived experiences will lead us. We never know the impact. We just go through life day after day. And the blessing that we have in Dr. Zapata is that she realized that now she can take her lived experiences, her education, and her passion for the issue, and to lift the voices of so many women, thousands and thousands of women in the country who have lost their babies. And she can lift those voices and elevate this issue on behalf of all Black women, to really allow us to, now we can channel our energy, our resources to completely reverse prematurity. So I want to say, Dr. Zapata, I'm sending you a tight hug. I love you. I honor you. I admire you. And I'm so grateful. I think that our community is better off, and we're grateful as advocates, as pioneers, as champions, that you're in this space with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to just share how the work that you do, you might not know how much it's impacting somebody at all. You might not know it, but it matters. And I just want to share this story with how I even met Dalvery. Is way back when I was in Marquette, and I had my first son. I was a senior. I had my son, and I remember getting invited to, I think it was like in a church or a small community center, to a breastfeeding support group for Black moms. And I said, okay, yeah, I'm thinking about breastfeeding. I might want to breastfeed one, I'm gonna try to make it to 3 months or just a couple. I'm gonna do it a little bit. But then when I got there, I'll never forget Dalvery in such a sweet way. She said, what do you think about a 6-month goal? And she challenged me. I was like, I never thought about that. And then she even challenged me to go to a year, and it completely shifted my mind. And Dalvery, back when I was in Marquette with my first baby, she taught me skills that helped me be successful with breastfeeding, and encouraged me and wrapped her arms around me to say, it's okay. Black women do breastfeed. You could be successful. This doesn't have to be painful and a negative experience. And she challenged me to go forward. And I'm happy to say I made that 1-year goal. But guess what? When I show those pictures of my daughter in the NICU, when she was fighting for her life and needed that breast milk, guess what? I built off the skills and the confidence that Dalvery gave me way back when I was in Marquette. When she was teaching me those things, she didn't know I was going to have a premature baby fighting for her life a few years later in a whole different city, and we had lost contact. And then life brought us back together. So anyway, I just want to honor you, Dalvery. Thank you for the work you do. It's life-saving. Sometimes people give honor to doctors or people on the front lines, but the work that you are doing with breastfeeding support, with advocating for women, all the work you are doing is so important. So I just want to love on you as well. But Let me stop because I already talked enough, but I just had to say that.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Dominique, your reaction.
Woo.
Exactly.
I had a whole moment. Dr. Zapata, it's such a pleasure to see you as well as everyone else. Some of the notes I took was I was so overwhelmed by your experience, but more so by your resilience and those around you. When I speak to tapping into that reservoir of resilience, just when you didn't think you had nothing left in you, your system did not let you think otherwise. But also, you know, when you speak to the complexity of that compounded trauma, which I'm sure will come up, there were so many layers and each layer had its own challenges, but you kept persevering. So thank you. And I honor your story. And the last thing I want to say as I'm listening to you, it's a reminder to use our blessings and our gifts so that we can do what other people thought was unimaginable.
Great. Prenice.
Dr. Zapata, I have heard this story, but when I tell you, you know, you heard the saying, if you ever see a movie and you see it again, it changes perspective and you see something different. That is what I had today. So I actually was like, I'm not gonna cry. I'm not going to cry in this testimonial because it is so heart. It just touches the heart in a special way. Being a mother who has experienced this preterm situation, like I can relate on so many levels. The beeping sound, it don't never go away. And for years I have said, I'm Moses. Like Moses is just me and this baby by ourselves in this NICU lab, going through all the external stuff, because when a baby comes home, nothing, you know, some things just don't change. You're by yourself. But this testimony and watching the comments like brought so much joy, because it's really not me and Moses. I'm not Moses with this baby going through the wilderness. It's a whole tribe of us going through this situation. And so, Dr. Jazz, I'm telling you, like, this testimony, I agree with you. There is a purpose. And that November 17th day, and then I'm gonna go a little step further. I'm gonna say one more thing. November 14th is when I had my first preemie. So it was like, yeah, I had like a wow moment. So this right here, like I have chills right now. I really appreciate, you can never get your story out enough, and you can never hear it enough until these babies stop dying at a high and at an all-time rate. The way that it is, the story never goes away and never stops. So I would say, like, I would encourage you to keep telling your story, as well as all of those of us that's out there continue to tell these stories until they hear us.
Thank you so much.
So you talked a little bit about the toll that it takes on the families. So, you know, from everybody's perspective, what you've seen, I know Dr. Dominique has probably talked to women who have gone through this. Prenice has experienced it. Dalvery, I know, has worked with people. How do infant mortality and prematurity impact the family, the fathers, the other children, when they're expecting a baby to come home and the baby can't even come home for Christmas?
This Dalvery, what comes to mind, Dr. Zapata hit a lot of the results, you know, the experiences on the head, but I do want to highlight what I'm finding in my work is the isolation that families go through, because we don't have that place where Black families can come and be supported during the time, let alone perinatal loss, which I like to talk about later, but when babies are in NICU. And so the isolation that many families might feel that, yes, they may know of someone who has had a premature baby, but now they have one. And where do they go and where do they turn? Also the impact on fathers. As many of us know on the panel and those who have also come to this space to hear what we're talking about, unfortunately, we have not centered Black male voices in this issue, and we have not paid attention to their pain and what they experience as Black men when their babies are in NICU. And we have to be honest, it's not about whether or not they're married, whether or not they're have a partner, or they're just in a relationship with somebody. These are babies that are dying, and this is real. These are babies that are really sick. So when we look at the responses and what's happening, how people are responding, I feel like isolation, and how we're ignoring almost, fathers are invisible. We're invisible to their pain.
I know Prenice talked about this when we were kind of, leading up to this. How did your husband deal with this, Prenice?
My husband at the time, when I had the second baby, the second preterm baby, he was in the operating room with me. He tried to be encouraging, like Dr. Jazz. My baby came out crying and then just stopped, and the whole room was silent. And I kept saying, something's wrong, babies don't do that, And so he was like, oh no, they're working on him, he's fine. So he was fine in that situation because I felt like he felt like he needed to be strong for me. However, when the baby was in the NICU and weeks went past, it was like, hold on, husband, you ain't came up here yet. What's going on with you? Like, I ain't seen you yet. Like, yeah, you could bring me a burger to the front door, but you ain't came up to see the baby. What's going on here? And I remember one night, because you do feel like you're isolated. You are lonely, in this situation. And so I remember reaching out to my mother-in-law, and she was like, Prenice, he just cannot deal with seeing that baby with all those tubes down his throat. He just can't see, he can't deal with it. And I'm like, I don't know, those who know my husband he's a nice size. Like, he's tall, he's wide, and he's like, this is my protector, this is my rock. So I just really felt that he should have been there during that time frame. But I also know that my gentle giant cannot stand, if the baby used the bathroom, he cannot stand the smell of it, And so I know that now, like, of course he couldn't handle the tubes, he couldn't handle that, But it was something that I had to embrace. Because in reality, and me and my husband talk about this all the time. In reality, I felt like if I had to look at my baby fighting for his life, I feel like you should have been looking at him fight for his life too. But I do also understand and respect the fact that he was also on the outside making sure that those other babies were taken care of. And he was also making sure that I have food up there. So I had to look at it from, like, what is he able to do and what is he doing now that could actually, that's benefiting this situation. But it did take a toll. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think my husband, even my little guy has autism that has stemmed from this whole situation. And so I don't think I've even seen my husband show any kind of emotion until he's 14 now, he was 12 years old, when I first seen my husband, like, give me a facial expression that I knew that this was heart-wrenching. But he never showed anything other than up until that point. But I think we just put him on this pedestal and say, you have to be strong, you have to do this. And they have emotions, and we void that all out, their emotions, because we have the stereotype that, guys are supposed to be strong and they can't show those emotions. It's unfortunate, but.
Dr. Dominique, I know you must deal with families and these types of emotions that Prenice is describing.
Yeah, I deal with it on so many layers. One of the things, as you all were talking about, when we think about the toll that it takes on families, it makes me think of stress sensitivity. So imagine a child who is expecting to see their little brother or sister, or a mom expecting to bring this child home, aunt, uncle, whoever is expecting this baby. And, we think of healthy babies. We don't think of visually seeing a premature baby. But when we look at stress sensitivity and how all of that trauma of seeing that baby, going through that experience impacts families, that's where we see a lot of the misinterpreted resilience and stress. Either a child may be doing so great, so they're not a problematic child, or they may be acting a fool, so therefore they get all these labels and stereotypes. Oh, the angry Black woman starts showing up. That stress sensitivity, it definitely comes from when we are acting not ourselves, but also we're having more ups and downs. So I see a lot of families who are really struggling with, how do I adapt to this new emotional state? How do I adapt when, wait, mommy, your stomach was big, but the baby is in the hospital until December?
Mm-hmm.
So we see a lot of those behaviors being acted out. I see a lot of couples who have very conflictual relationships, and it's pushed to the brink. But with all of that stuff, we also see a lot of the upside of people really acknowledging when they need help, when they need support. Dr. Zapata, you described so many of your experiences, and a lot of my families I work with, I think that's probably their true introduction to like issues such as systemic racism or institutional racism. Your pain isn't that bad, or, you know, it's this. So a lot of my clients come in, that's where we see the layers of trauma was if they had paid attention. So therefore we see guilt. You could just see the magnitude of mental health stress that came from this very complex experience. So in doing family therapy, it's a lot of layers. We call it peeling back the onion. So a lot of layers to get to the core of this. This is very scary, and how are we going to navigate it?
And
Yeah,
Dr.
I would.
I'll go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, I agree with all that. And thank you for your work with the family therapy, because that is something that really helped us. Um, and I wish there was more access to that, or understanding, or less stigma around that. So when you talk about relationships, I used to see this a lot, particularly in the cancer ward for kids when I was rotating through there during my training. I was just shocked by the high rates of divorce when a child gets diagnosed with cancer. It was, I don't know the exact statistics, but it's just it's just tremendous. It's very, very high, the rates of divorce, but it's also it's all that stress that comes with it. So when Amira was in the NICU, and then even after, when we're just trying to navigate how to have this critically ill baby even at home, my husband and I really had some clash and issues. It was just because we were so emotional, didn't know how to process what we were feeling. So thankfully we went to some family therapy, and that kind of helped us process everything of what just happened. And so I just want to say thank you for that, because it's so needed. And as we're looking at ways to support Black families that are impacted by infant mortality and prematurity, that needs to be the access to mental health and family therapy, awareness about it, less stigma, innovative ways to do it, other than just like coming into an office and sitting around a circle. Innovative, out the box ways. That is something that I strongly advocate for. So thank you for what you do. And
you're speaking my language now, Ms. Vivian. Can I jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
Yep. So as you all heard in my introduction, I'm the owner and clinical director of Beloved Wellness Center, and it is a Black-owned, female-led private mental health practice in Kenosha. I am one of two Black-run organizations that are intentionally providing access, real, relevant, and relatable mental health care to Black and Brown people. And I applaud all of my active ally colleagues and community members. However, when we're talking about vulnerability and the historical context, I tell my clients, you don't have to give me every nitty gritty. You don't have to break down what that means in a definition form. Let's get to healing. So that offers a unique opportunity and space to do that. But one more thing I want to say, if we really think about a family context and how premature or infant mortality affects individuals, I am a Black woman who does not have children, okay? But I know, because of all the stressors and receiving that vicarious or that secondhand trauma of hearing or seeing my friends and my clients go through it, my utero has already absorbed the stressors of the world. So therefore, it just adds to that layer and the complexity of what it's to be like to be Black and a woman. My education does not exempt me from any of the stuff. The data with infant mortality shows that we're not exempt from any of it. But sometimes our unique and individual makeup is enough to receive a lot of those stressors and complexities. So that's another layer to think about it, of individuals who have not even had children yet, of how these experiences are impacting them as they are family members of those that do.
Great
So
point.
that kind of leads into really my next question was, why is it that Black women with a college education are more likely to experience an adverse birth outcome than white women with a high school education?
I think Dr. Dominic just hit it on the head. The mere fact that we are Black women puts us at risk for less than optimal um, birth outcomes. And let's remind ourselves that Black women are twice as more likely to have preterm labor, go into preterm labor with babies. We're 4 times more likely to die during pregnancy or from complications of labor. And it's mainly due to racialized trauma in a white supremacist society, unfortunately. And I want to add this. Over the years, AABN has been in existence for 11 years. And we have watched the advances in neonatal medicine. We have watched and been in the space of the advances in obstetrician medicine. However, we have also watched the devastation and the lack of advancement and making sure that women have adequate, equitable healthcare access and are heard. And it's devastating. And now we see the results, and now we're speaking up, and we're going to do something about it.
And it's going to take all of us, right, Dr.
Yeah.
Zapata?
Oh, everybody, yes. And one thing too, there's a lot of active research looking into this that looks at why having higher education for Black women is not as protective as it is for white women in protecting against poor birth outcomes. And there's a lot of interesting research into this. I'm speaking now from some preliminary things I've been reading, but also from my personal opinion. I think that sometimes the higher you go in education, you go to college, you get your master's, you go get a doctorate, unless you're at an HBCU, what type of institutions are you having to navigate? Primarily white institutions. And when you are there, you face a lot of microaggressions, implicit bias. You have more knowledge of things that are going on. And there's studies that show even perceived discrimination can impact your biology, that can impact your birth outcomes. And so I think that that's a topic that needs to really get some light shed on it and some more research and advocacy for. How are we treating Black women in higher education that are getting those college degrees and fighting for promotions, have to work just as hard? First of all, there's inequities in just like gender with pay, but then when you add in race as well, so you have to work twice as hard just to get the same thing. But let me be quiet for I don't want to stir things up too much, but know that that's on my mind, and we're coming with some studies to look into that and to advocate for that. How are we treating Black women and families in the workplace as they navigate these higher educations? What things are they pulling with them as they're trying to climb the ladder? We as Black women are pulling everybody with us. Some things that I didn't even mention during my medical school years, we had 3 families from our personal network living in our basement because they were homeless and supporting. Like, there's a lot of layers going on. We are so community driven. As we go up, we're carrying everybody with us. But what toll is that taking? And then what microaggressions are we facing at work as we're getting those higher degrees? I think that plays a role too. But let me mute my mic before I get in trouble.
You are not going to get in trouble.
I think that's a great opportunity to piggyback off that. Is sometimes we have to look inward. So a lot of the subcultural stressors that we go through as well, that is a component of that research. And, I was talking with several of my clients. I'm also a counselor on a college campus as well. Several of my clients, and when I reflect over my testimony, I was that torchbearer. I could not fail, so I could not take care of myself because I had to take care of 5 other siblings. So that adds to the complexity and to the trauma that if I can't fail, where am I putting that stress? How is that stress being acted out? It's not. It's internal, and my body is emotionally bookkeeping. There is a great book and a lot of research about the body keeps score. And what it says, that all the areas where we're getting trauma from, our body is keeping score of that. So when it's time to do something with that trauma, it either takes a toll or is acted out, oftentimes unproductively.
And I want to add that where it's acted out and where it's triggered in the body is metabolism, the metabolism as well as
Okay.
our immune system.
Mhm.
And those two are that actually just exploded in um, they become dissolved actually. And Dr. Zapata, maybe you could talk a little bit more about where, because of the chronic stress and the how is that channeled in the body and where does it go and how does it set us up for infant mortality and maternal mortality?
Good question, Dalvery. Dr. Jazz, you want to answer that? Where does chronic stress manifest itself in our bodies? And you're on
I'm
mute.
on mute. I'm on mute. There's a lot of different things that it can do, but one thing I'll talk about is the brain. The brain. So it does a lot of things on our bodies. And one person I do want to shout out to who's on here, who was actually a speaker earlier on. So you are a plug to the replays. Go watch Beverly Hutcherson's replay about biology and stress. She is a reproductive endocrinology specialist, and she's getting her training in that. And she is amazing. She breaks it down to the follicle and what it's doing to the eggs. So I can't do it as much justice as she can, but shout out to her. Go rewatch that whole replay. But
Yeah.
it does a lot to our bodies. But I want to talk for a moment about what it does to the brain, because that's something that I feel that we don't talk about a lot. We're always talking about the body, but let's talk about the brain. Similar to what happens when we look at adverse childhood experiences, I believe that it's a similar mechanism, and research shows that it's a similar mechanism. When we face traumas, whether it's racial trauma or other things, we think of, it's almost like if you get a cut on your arm or you get a bruise, you can see it and you know, like, ow, I have an injury. But when traumas happen, our brains are getting hurt. There are actual chemical changes, things happening in our brain. But since we can't see that, we don't take it as seriously. We need to start thinking and talking about that as a community. So what happens with adverse childhood experiences, so as the brain is developing and you're facing traumas and stresses and things, it actually changes the architecture of your brain. And so one of the areas that it impacts is your frontal cortex, right here in the front. Your frontal cortex is the part of your brain that helps you have higher order thoughts, helps you process things, deeper thinking. It also inhibits you from doing things. So like if somebody walks up to you and slaps you, your first reaction is what? To slap them right back. But if I'm at work, I'm like, okay, hold on, Jasmine, let me, get it together. I got to keep my job. What I want to do, if I saw you on the street, what I would have did. No, just kidding. I'm not going to do that. Maybe not. But let me be serious. Your frontal cortex helps you to like process your emotions, and it inhibits you from like just acting out on your emotions, and it helps you to a higher order processing. They've shown that children, as their brains are developing, that have experienced traumas, there's less connections in that part of the brain. It impacts the actual size and structure of your frontal cortex. Also, the parts of your brains that deals the amygdala, hippocampus, parts of your brain that deal with fear and emotion state, they saw that those areas were impacted as well. So then when you look at children who have been impacted by trauma, and then you notice when you look at our criminal justice system or in schools, kids that have higher rates of adverse childhood experiences might be more on edge, where they just snap more, they're hyper alert. That's because of actual changes in the structure of the brain. We need to be talking about that. So I believe that similarly, when you have racial traumas all your life, I can go into stories of when I was a little girl. I went to an all-white elementary school and middle school. I had somebody literally tell me, go back to Africa. Somebody look at the pants I was wearing and saying, and say, thank you. Hold on. See, look at this support system. My boo just was cooking me some food and handed it to me while I'm doing my lecture. I love my husband, but anyway, in the same way, those racial trauma, I had a lot of racial traumas just even as a younger girl, that is impacting our brain. So in the same way we go to the doctor because something is hurt, we need to treat our brains, go to psychologists, go to therapists, go heal your mind, because all of this is having an important a toll on our mind, in addition to all the things that it does to the body as well. Does that answer your question, Dalry? I can go into the specific things in the body, but that's just the one I really wanted to point out.
That's something I feel we don't talk about. So definitely, thank you so much for sharing.
And a quick plug too, I want to say, and I'm not ashamed to say it because I'm just being open. Y'all saw all my pictures and everything today. I might as well be open. So even right now, I have an amazing Black therapist, and I'm not afraid to tell it because I talk to everybody else about mental health. I knew that I was going into the pandemic. It's hard when you're treating patients with COVID as a Black woman, all that's going on, even to have to heal from trauma I didn't know I had from giving birth to this premature baby. Yes, I'm so resilient. Dr. Jazz is so strong, but I had to say, I need to heal my mind. So I have an amazing Black therapist, and she's trained in racial trauma, healing from racial trauma. I didn't even know that was a thing to do. I just thought typically you go to therapy when you have problems, but I said, I just need to go in, and it's been absolutely amazing. And so thank you, Dr. Dominique, for all that you do, everybody else who focuses on mental health. But I would say, let's bring that into the conversation as well. I'm gonna be done.
Yeah, we all need to go to that therapist then, racial trauma too.
Well, one of the things I want to speak to, I share that area of focus and training with racial-based trauma and healing. And one of the things as a mental health professional, I had to undo in order to be a better Black therapist to my clients that specialize in trauma is to undo a lot of the psychological theories and lenses which we were taught to help Black and Brown people. Because sure, they've been around for thousands of years. However, when we look at how that stuff was normed, it was not tailored to or normed on Black and Brown populations. One of the areas that I am a new practitioner or a trained practitioner in is brain spotting, where it gets us out of that thinking, that frontal part of our brain, and goes to that subcortical part where all of those memories are so deep rooted, and it allows you to access those in a shared, safe space. So that is an example of an intervention that is thought of through a racial sensitivity lens rather than compounded on white European theories and orientations.
Thank you, Dr. Dominique. How should African-American mothers advocate for themselves when speaking with a doctor who might be ignoring their symptoms? And I want to start with Pratnese because she's smiling because I know, having worked with Pratnese is very outspoken, but when she talks about, being, in the hospital alone, that whole thing may change, that whole experience may change your personality. So I want to start with you on that.
When I was listening to Dr. Jazz talk, and she was talking about her concerns when she called the hospital, I was like, you too. Like, I had a you too moment. Like, I think we should have a you too movement just for these kind of situations. So in my situation, I went in for back pain. I went in for a checkup. I told them I had back pain. They told me, don't worry about it. That's part of the pregnancy. And so later on down the line, I sat there, I called the nurses, this back pain is getting, okay, take medication, this, that, and another, leave it alone. No big deal. Okay. Next thing you know, I'm in the hospital, and I gave birth to the baby. Baby went to the NICU, and the doctor told me the infection that your son has is only caused by a kidney infection. You go downstairs and tell them to run the blood work to make sure that to test you, to make sure that you're, to get you your antibiotics and all that other good stuff. Even when I went down there and said that, the doctor still was like, you don't have a kidney infection. And so after me sitting there, after I had to sit there and fuss, finally got one. And then lo and behold, of course, I had this kidney infection. This kidney infection could have been identified when I first said I had back pain. So this goes back to even the long-lasting effects that it has on the mental, Dr. Dominique, because for the longest, I blame myself for not advocating hard enough for me. I know my body better than anybody else knows my body. So if I were to talk to someone right now who says, hey, I have this pain, I would tell her, number one, you go ahead and complain about that pain. If you feel like you need to be at the hospital right now, go ahead and go to that hospital right now. The nurses are there to help you. The doctors are there to help you. So go ahead. It's okay to work their nerves. They're getting paid good money for it. So go ahead and work their nerves. On top of all of that, if you don't feel like you have the strength, because not everybody, and I am very bold, and I think this comes from childhood, but I believe that if you're not bold enough to go up there and stand for your own self, get you a doula. I know some good doulas that will show up and act out for your rights and to make sure that you're assessed properly. I've seen it my own self with the We Rise nurse doulas. So I know they do that. So if you don't have a doula, find you someone in your support circle that's going to actually pound that payment for you until you get, even if it's just a minor back pain, because that mindset that I did this to my boy 14 years later, it's still a little inkling there that says, hey, if you would have just did a little bit more for me. Mm-hmm. I know I should not be weighing that, but it does weigh heavy on your heart. Mm-hmm. So my recommendation is just to pound that pavement like you only have one life and you only have one of those particular babies. I only have one Gia and I only have one Giovanni. I got 5 kids, y'all, but I only got one Gia and one Giovanni. So that will be my recommendation.
I like to add, we work with a lot of women prenatally. And of course, we advocate for women to birth with a doula. But let's go back a little bit, because we like to meet our women when they first find out that they're pregnant. They are their biggest advocates as a consumer. And if we change the language to help them understand that they are consumers in maternity practice and care. And so, in selecting a healthcare provider, it's very important that women do some internal work on themselves in terms of what birth experience do you desire? What do you want to happen during your pregnancy, throughout your pregnancy, after birth, postpartum, after? Develop a birth plan, talk with your provider. And if your provider is not in line to your vision and your hopes and your dreams and your excitement and everything, don't hesitate to change your provider, because I did. I changed my provider when I was 8 months pregnant with my first child, because I needed to know that my provider was on my side and I was just not a statistic. How many times do we hear Black women say, I feel like I'm just a statistic. I got 15 minutes in the doctor's office. We have to start helping women, Black women, advocate as consumers, even those quiet ones, right? We have, I meet a lot of women who are meek and quiet. And so once we start to change the way of thinking that you are a consumer, you're about to purchase something that costs a lot of money. You're about to receive services that are linked directly to cost and outcome. Who are you? What kind of births do you want to have? What is your expectation? What was your experience before? How can we make this different? And like Bernice alluded to, a doula can help with that. And we need to make sure that the doula is interfacing prenatally. I know that there's postpartum doulas, and I support that. But our work in We Rise, we really try to meet the women early to do those assessments, find out who her network or support is, and what type of birth that she desires, who's on her side.
Yeah. Those are some excellent, oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. I was going to say, I would add, to help African-American women advocate when talking to their doctor is interview your provider. I do free 15-minute. Yes, it's 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, we are going to know whether it's an alignment, but interview your providers, because that's one thing you see white women bragging on, boasting about, that I interview my provider. They take ownership of having that time. So interview your provider. If you have insurance benefits, contact your insurance benefits and see everything you qualify for, everything, okay? And if you are uninsured, get that doctor's office policy to make sure that they're providing you equal, equitable, and fair opportunities as though someone with insurance. If you have state insurance, make sure that same policy is the same as those with private insurance. I encourage all of my clients, whether they're going to OBGYNs or just your general checkup, figure out what that billing code is for that session, because my sessions, a 30-minute session is up to 16 minutes, and I'm going to get all 16 minutes, okay? Use every minute so that you do not feel rushed, but go in with questions, go in with concerns, go in with, hey, I do know more Black babies die, et cetera, et cetera. How are you all looking to reshape your environment at this clinic? Are you trauma not just aware, sensitive, and open-minded? My dentist office, before you put that vest on me, you better have asked if I have a history of trauma and being held down and assaulted. Okay, so those are some of the things to empower clients. And like you said, Pernice, take somebody that's going to show up and show out. And my sister always says, sis, I need you to do your thing. Well, what at? So those are some of the things. And, for some reason, we have to keep in mind, we are helpers and we are providing an exchange of services. So if any of my questions bother you, I will challenge my doctor to say, I see that you're uncomfortable with that question. Because if you're getting that from me, I don't want you holding my baby when my baby comes out.
Absolutely. And if we're working with women who are a little bit on the quiet side, because we're all like, we're confident, we express ourselves. But if we are working with women who are on the quiet side and not sure of, how they should react to a system that is already pushing back, right? I think role playing with women, we do a lot of role playing with AAB and through the work that we do with women, not only how to talk to their provider, but also how to talk to their employer about returning back to work in school and providing lactation spaces and support throughout the maternity leave and when they return.
Yes.
Valerie, Pernice mentioned We Rise doulas. So can you tell people what we know what that is, but I want the audience to understand what you do with We Rise doulas too.
Well, I'm going to first start off by saying our organization has always supported the community of doulas, Black doulas. So 14 months ago or a year ago, we received a grant from the Wisconsin Partnership Program with our Community Doula Initiative. And the Community Doula Initiative, the primary purpose was to build support among Black doulas and birth workers, and to also build capacity building. Because it doesn't matter how much we know, it doesn't matter how much we do. If women are not advocating for doulas, our work is that much more difficult. They need to go into their provider saying, I want to birth with a doula, I deserve a doula, so I need to have access to a doula. So we started with the Community Doula Initiative, and then the pandemic happened. And so we know with the pandemic, we live differently, we love differently, and we serve differently. So we knew automatically that birthing Black women needed support in the hospital. So our project director, I noticed that she's in this space, Kayla Mumford. She's our project director with We Rise Doulas. Her and another young lady, Lakita, I'm sorry, I can't remember her last name, but she works with us as well. They both came to us as Black doulas and said, Valkyrie, we want to do this work. This is what we see the greatest need with the pandemic. So we created ReRise project, and the ReRise project is a project of 24 Black doulas working in Milwaukee, southeastern Wisconsin, Racine, and Kenosha to support Black birthing women and to prevent the transmission of COVID-19. And so we're very proud of our work that we're doing. We started in May And Kayla, our project director, has been able to keep them together and keep them, have them understand that collectively they're stronger. And we support them with different workshops and helping them build their own practice. That's really important to the African American Breastfeeding Network, that we're supporting doulas in this space and helping them build their practice so that we can serve Black families better. Bernice, I know you are on our grant team. Is there anything else you would like to share about the Re-Rise Doula project and the work that you have been involved with?
I think you covered it for the most part, Dalry, but I will say, like, when I'm not just saying this to say this, guys. When I tell you that these ladies pound the pavement, like, they are actually doing that. There was a situation where I got a phone call. I tell the story all the time. I got a phone call where there was a 23-week-old baby that was in the process of being born. And the medical staff was not very supportive, wasn't putting a lot of information in there. And I reached out to one of those doulas, and Kayla Mumford, and I didn't have to do nothing else. It was just like, she took it and was like, I'm here. And I mean, and I think from there, some things have even helped disperse into the whole Re-Rise revolving around COVID and rights and regulations. I mean, I cannot speak. I can't even put into words how great this program that they are running is. And I know we lost that baby, unfortunately, but that baby lit a fire that needed to be lit too.
I'm going to get to some of the questions in the chat, and this was early on. And one said, after the initial concern while pregnant and the responses, did you find yourself viewing prenatal care differently, or did you focus on changing the status quo? And I think that is for Dr. Jazz.
Yeah. I didn't, when it was happening at the time, for quite a while, I just thought like, oh, they just missed it. It was just an accident. They really just thought it was Braxton Hicks contractions. But then after I really started seeing like, wait a minute, this is happening to a lot of other Black women. Listen to all the different stories of Black women not being heard and believed. It's kind of like I knew that things were happening, but then I finally realized like that might have played a role into what happened to me. It actually took me a while to even process that. I blamed it on myself, kind of how Bernice was saying. I blamed it on myself for a while, saying I should have known better. Like, I'm in medical school to be a doctor. How did I not recognize that was preterm birth? Where now I know, and now I'm very vocal about it. So it made me look, it made me have my guard up more, that just because, and I am a doctor, and I could say this, just because a doctor or a medical professional tells you something or they think it's so, doesn't mean it's true. They could be wrong. I'm wrong about some stuff. I'm a doctor. I got all them degrees you can list off, but I get stuff wrong too. Doctors are just human beings as well. And I think a lot of time, especially when we talk about power dynamics, you have the power dynamic of people coming in their white coats, or, they're doctors and have all these degrees, or even nurses or other professionals, nurse practitioners, whoever. And then you're just like, oh, I'm not in the healthcare field. So a lot of times we just kind of defer and believe, well, if they say it, it must be true. And then when you add on to that, the complexities of a man who is a doctor and a white man who is a doctor, and then Black women who come in. So anyway, I think that's one shift. It made me change my thinking to just say, healthcare professionals are just like anyone else. They have trained, because believe me, we've had hours and hours of training and learning statistics, but just because 90% of the time something happens, I could be in that 10% of that it's not going to happen in. Or how do you know that? Let's talk about the pros and the cons if I make this decision or not. So anyway, to answer the question, it definitely changed my perspective. It just made me look at things more critically, and take more time to build trust with the healthcare providers that I have. And it did ignite my fire to help reform and change the whole way that prenatal care is delivered. So both of those things.
And Dr. Jazz, another question for you, either from your personal or professional experience. do Black women receive the same quality care in these cases as white women, for example?
Ooh, that is a good question. So I was able to partner with Dr. Lavina Coley, who's a phenomenal Black woman who does research in this area. And we wrote a paper called More Than a Number. I believe it was like in the Women's Health Issues Journal. So you can kind of go on Google Scholar and look that up. We wrote a paper where basically, to answer that question you asked, I have to see, you say the word quality. Whose definition of quality are you referring to? From what lens are we looking? Does quality of care mean using all the most recent recommendations from the American College of Gynecology? Does it mean timely appointments? Does it mean cutting edge research? Or does it mean communication? Whose lens are you looking through? So in this research study, we actually interviewed Black women, white women, and healthcare providers and asked them, what is your definition of quality of care? And interestingly, we saw that the Black women had a very different, when we analyzed the emerging themes, we saw that the Black women's definition was very different than the white women or even the healthcare providers. The Black women valued that their definition of quality was spend more time with me. Don't be coming in this appointment after 5 minutes, just rush. Spend time with me. Don't make assumptions about me. When I was in the hospital with Amira, my son and daughter have different texture hair, but the same dad. But the nurse said to me, she said, their hair is so cute. Do they have the same dad? This is literally in the hospital. They asked me, now I know if I was a white woman, I know I don't got to have no evidence, no paper, no proof. I'm telling you, if I was a white woman with the kids, which you would not flat out ask her, oh, do your kids have the same dad? No, you wouldn't do that. But anyway, quality is don't judge me. Spend time with me, get to know me, address racism, like talk about that issue. Don't sugarcoat it and hide it. Don't push decisions on me because you just have so much more education. Let's talk about it and come to a decision together. That was what the Black women defined as high quality versus white women, and the healthcare professionals talked about emphasized more heavily cutting edge research, using the latest technology or medications and things like that. So when we ask that question, I challenge you to ask yourself, whose definition of quality are we using? So from that perspective, I don't believe that is the case. And I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm not saying that in the healthcare field, we're doing that intentionally because we just hate Black women and we're doing all these things on purpose, but just the way our system is designed, it does, especially because Black women value time and some of those other things, just the system is not designed to uniquely cater to what Black women are saying is most important.
Thank you, Dr. Jazz. Another question, how do we effectively push for a culture shift where the academic institutions and workplaces aren't toxic to our well-being? A lot of places are now hiring D&I staff, but how can we support them in their role to be more effective? Anybody want to take a stab at that? I see a lot of head nods. Dr. Dominique.
Sure, I'll take a go for it. I think a larger examination, it makes me think of, the whole buy Black concept. So it's so important that, as a business owner, that if you have the opportunity to start building your businesses, building your communities so that there is a shared understanding of the differences, the challenges, but also what we need to overcome a lot of those roadblocks. So just using me as a personal example, I thank God that I had the opportunity to open up a practice that is so intentional. There is no mistake about who is my focused population. And I bring other clinicians on who have that similar mindset. So I say that I can't say, oh, I only want to hire Black people, but I say, do you have an invested interest in serving and committing yourself to BIPOC individuals? So when we have leaders who are in position to bring other people on, that's how we can start creating those communities to dismantle a lot of those isms and challenges. But how can we help DEI individuals? I am a corporate trainer for corporate America. And I actually have something at 12:30 at radio at 9 o'clock and another training at 12:30. So they are intentionally bringing in people who are real, relevant, and relatable, because anyone can come into a corporation and give the fluff talk, but are you going to give these people something tangible to keep them pushing. And, you know, with our most recent VP elect, we are shattering ceilings. So it's that reminder that when you are in a position, keep pushing. People are watching. So how do we support them? We come to them, because I didn't wait for people to come and find me or wait to bring the resources to my people, my friends, my families, and the community. I'm coming to y'all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Another question. Long-term stress can actually age your genetic makeup by shortening your telomere lengths and breaks down your body at a molecular level.
We know.
And so I have also invited Beverly Hutcherson. And Beverly, do you mind turning on your camera? Because I can't remember who said, I think it was Dr. Jazz said that Beverly was actually one of the panelists on our inaugural webinar. And so Beverly, if you can help, thank you so much. If you can kind of chime in, we knew we would come back to you at some point, huh? You know how we do it over here.
Oh, well, thank you. Can you all hear me?
We
Yes.
can.
Okay, so I first have to acknowledge Dr. Zapata and I are co-directors of SMPH's premier K through 12 outreach program, The Ladder. And so that is my girl, that's my sister. So I'm here truly supporting her and all that she brings to the space. So I just wanted to acknowledge her, and she did a phenomenal job. I would not have been able to keep together telling that story. So
Right?
I didn't keep it together listening to the story. But yeah, so when it comes to the biology, it's interesting that you bring that up, because right before this talk, I was talking with my primary investigator, preparing to listen to this talk, doing a bit of research on the intersections of the social science that is critically important in supporting Black women and babies in surviving all that we live through. And then how do we translate all that we know that racism does into the biological impacts that happen within the body? So someone brought up telomere. So for those who don't know what a telomere is, it's basically, so our chromosomes have like a length, and that length can determine a bit about our health. And so what has been shown is that the shorter the telomere, the shorter, or the adverse health outcomes, the shorter the lifespan. So that impact that we are seeing on, we're looking at just mom. So that Pranice on here was talking about her experience. Her story didn't start with her. Her story started with her grandmother. So her birth outcomes are a consequence of what her grandmother experienced. So it is intergenerational. So the interventions that Dr. Zapata and Dr. Pritchard and Dallery are talking about are these acute interventions that are trying to get us through the moment, right? So it's important to understand, as we look at the concept of a life course, that what we're talking about today is how do we get Black mothers and Black babies to survive just the moment, but the story does not begin there, nor does it end there. Because those babies, as Dr. Zapata talked about, that baby survived, but that baby has a long road ahead. So she's thriving, but she is biologically reprogrammed. And so the interventions throughout her life, so one of the things Dr. Zapata did is study preventive health, right? How do we prevent those that she might be programmed for that don't have to happen though with intervention? And so we could have the telomeres, but they don't have to live out that course if we intervene ahead of time. So to give an example with preeclampsia is high blood pressure during pregnancy. What cardiologists understand about preeclampsia is that preeclampsia isn't necessarily because of pregnancy, but that pregnancy was the event that activated the vulnerability that already existed in the cardiovascular system. So what we are seeing with pregnancy Pregnancy is a biological event that's going to activate the stuff that was already there. It's not necessarily the cause. It's just such a hard hit to our system that all of these other biological things that were kind of sitting and waiting in dormancy, that pregnancy activates that whole cascade of events. But with intervention, so one of the benefits of Dr. Zapata being a student, a medical student, is the access to resources. I was a graduate student, and she and I had almost the exact same situation. We've talked about this. I was a graduate student. So my graduate advisor made a phone call, and I had intervention, and then I had care. So how do we translate those of us who are in the room, like we're at the table? We got to take that access and translate that and make it available to those of us who don't have those privileges. So yes, the telomeres are a factor. Yes, our biology is a factor, but it is those social support systems, the changing of policy that is going to intervene to prevent or then catch and treat the things that we are biologically prone for. And the good news is that 3 generations down from Pernice and me and you, we can reverse the impact. So it's a generational life course. It's not just the life course of mom or the life course of the baby. It's 3 generations of intervention before we're going to start seeing a reversal of the biology. And then we will see that the health outcomes look different.
Thank you so much, Beverly. It's 12:22, so we're having an awesome conversation. And so we need to kind of wrap up though. And so what I want to do is just go through our panelists, including you, Beverly, and say one thing, just one thing, one word, one sentence of what you want our audience to leave after all that we've talked about, what you want our audience to leave with. I'm going to start with Dr. Dominique.
One sentence? One sentence. All right. Well, thank you all so much for this opportunity. I'm over here taking notes like I am a student back in school. Whenever I have these kind of conversations with, Black women, and just being in a space of love, it just reinvigorates me to like, okay, I got to do more, or I want to do differently and more. But what I will leave you all with is your condition does not have to become your conclusion. Things may be challenging, things may be complicated, and we may be paying for the consequences of grandma, great-grandma Shelley, and everybody else that came before us. However, you are so worth it, and you deserve a life where disparity should not be a barrier, and you deserve a life that is worth living in wellness and in health. If you are looking for a Black female mental health clinician, I am located at Beloved Wellness Center. So please feel free to contact me. And if we are in a good alignment, I look forward to serving you.
Dalvery.
Wow, that's a packed question. There's so many things that we didn't even have enough time, right, to explore so many other areas. But I think I would leave with the idea that we need to allow women to lead and be an integral part of their health care. Black folks, Caucasian, all people of color, and to listen to women, to watch their spaces, and to honor their work and what they feel. So I think we have to do so much more work in just listening to Black women talk about their Black bodies and how they feel and what they see. And one last thing I have to leave with this. Going into a home setting, so any visitation, community health workers, any programs that are dealing with women where we can either do a virtual, now everything is virtual, or we can go do home visits at some point. Again, I'm sure I strongly support, because it's in the home where you begin to see a lot of those dynamics working that she can't even articulate.
Thank you so much. Prenice.
I would just start off by first, one thing is that when we leave here, just to acknowledge, like you can't do anything until you acknowledge the fact that our African-American babies are dying at an all-time rate. They're being premature, born premature at an all-time rate. So once we acknowledge that, I think that we can do some work around that. I want us to also acknowledge that systemic racism do exist. It does not, you hear so many, well, coulda, woulda, shouldas, I don't know, let me debate, let me talk about it a little bit more, what can we do type of things. But in the same sense, like, let's just first acknowledge and have a hardcore acknowledgement that this exists. Mm-hmm. And then we also acknowledge the fact that we as a community have the power to shift these policies and systems. So I know we talked about different interventions. Dr. Beverly brought that out to us, different interventions and how that can actually steer the course for the next generation and the next generation. Like having that power to come together and not working in the silos, but coming together and building up on that. So once we acknowledge everything, and then we come together as a team and like a force and a tribe, like our babies will be born and thriving, and and then we can put this to rest. And I don't know if I will see this, in my lifetime, but my hopes is that my grandbabies will at least see this in their lifetime.
Oh, that's good. Beverly.
So 2 words, bi-directional coalition. So we often think about pathway or pipeline programs, and we think all the way up to the institution, but this doesn't work if those of us who get into the institution and have these doctoral or master's degrees don't bring it back to our communities. Because Ms. Blackwell spoke about the advocacy that's needed, but how can you advocate when you don't know what to ask for, when you don't have language for that space? So we have to, as we are doing everything we learn, we've got to learn how to take it into a community format so that our community is empowered in those spaces. And then the bi-directional piece is also, we gotta shake the table in these spaces and get these folks together. And I'm not gonna be nice about that, because when I hear about Black death, I don't have time for political correctness. And our babies are dying. That is a genocide. To continue to allow our babies to die at this rate is a genocide. And so at some point, we've got to call it what it is. And I don't need you to morally agree with anything, but you need to act right from 9 to 5 when you're in the office with these patients. And those babies' lives have to matter. So that's how I see it.
And last but not least, Dr. Jazz.
Yeah, I would like to echo what everyone said, and I want people to stay encouraged. That's what I have on my heart today. All that we're going through, well, first of all, we were going through some stuff even before this got to be the hot popular topic to talk about anti-racism. We've been working on this for years and years and years. This has been our experience. So this is a trauma on top of a trauma right now, what we're living through. And oftentimes it can get heavy. And even for our allies, of all of you who are on this call, sometimes it can get discouraging, like, oh, we always hear the statistics or talk about the problem, nothing is changing. But I just want everybody to stay encouraged, because it took us 400 years, or going all the way back to slavery days, to get to the situation that we're in right now. We're not going to undo it in a year or in one grant cycle or conveniently in 4 years or anything like that. It's going to take time. So the things that our grandparents and great grandparents experienced, we're experiencing the ripple effects of that today. So stay encouraged, because even though we might not be able to see right in front of our faces the reward, we are changing things for our future generations, for our grandbabies and great grandbabies. Things are happening. So please, I just want everybody to stay encouraged. And that's what I'll end with. Stay encouraged, because we are doing some amazing work.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you to our panelists. You were great. While they were wrapping up, I was dropping in the survey link, so please do that, but we will send it to all the registrants. Also, people were asking about the recording. It will be on our Life website, and we put that in there as well. So just stay tuned to our website. Thank you for joining us. We also have it live on Facebook, so the recording will be there as well. And we just appreciate you joining Addressing Systemic Racism, the Toll of Infant Mortality and Prematurity on African Americans. Have a wonderful day.